So let's just go up the elevator. We can come back down the stair. All of these, again, were made to drop ore down. So there's a hole here. When they put the elevator in, they had a blast. They had a blast a little bigger to put the elevator in. That was an interesting story because about 11 years ago, guys from Hoover Construction come in, and they're used to doing this kind of work. The boss said, you know, this rock is different. Pretty hard. Do you want me to get some old miners up here to coach you a little? Of course, they were offended by that, so we know what we're doing. He came down later in the day, and they was like, what the hell's going on? Guess what? He goes, well, we're doing okay on this side. We got over here, and he shows them, and he's got pictures of this bit, completely rounded. It's really sharp tungsten carbide bit, the same ones we used here. He said, I told you. He goes, you've never seen anything like this, he said.
How many feet have we actually moved vertically with this elevator, do you think?
Okay, that's a good question. So the drift was about 8 or 9 feet high, and then there's about 15 to 20 feet of rock.
Okay.
So our floor is about 15 feet thick. So just short of 30 feet. I was just measuring it the other day. It was 20-some feet. So this is another ore raise. So we filled this in a little bit, but the deposit's out here. We know it's out here. We've been mapping it, and we get the drift out here. And one of these holes is the first one they come up, and they leave that amount of rock. And when we go down, you'll see it. We leave that floor. Once we get to where we want to be, we start pushing in all directions. So it's going to be a low back cut like this, somewhere in the neighborhood of, so you can still see sparkles, 10 feet. And we will push in all directions, looking for the edge of the ore deposit. So as we're going 10 feet at a time, again, we're doing this at the height of that room back there, low. Okay, the tall ceiling will be the second cut. And we find the walls. We find greenstone. When we hit the edge, we're done. Okay? That's the edge of the ore deposit in this area. You get false endings. This, when they hit this, they might have thought, well, we're at the edge, right? But then they drilled this area out, blasted it, and well, there's still ore. So then they keep going, and they went right around this. So this is a greenstone pillar. It's not here to hold the thing up, and look at there's some banded jasper in there too. That's not sellable ore, so we're leaving it here. It's not there to hold the place up.
So the veins of ore are normally well defined and
Yeah, yeah. When we find the edge, if we look around this room, all the walls, it's the edge of the ore.
Oh,
So this is a greenstone, and so this, you guys see this hole back here in the corner? That's a significant thing. It's in the greenstone, it's being driven upward. It's a special rock raise called the winds. Its purpose is to connect us to the level above. There's 200 feet between the tracks. It's at an angle, there's a lot of engineering involved, but they got about 60 feet on this one and never finished it. The purpose of that is we're going to need to bring waste rock in this room eventually. So we find the edge of the ore at a 10-foot height. And then we take another 10-foot slice up to get this. Okay, the 20-foot high back cut. We are going to keep mining up from here. Our goal is to mine all the ore between here, stopping just short of the next level in this column, irregular column of ore. In order to do that, we have to raise the floor. And that's the step we're at when we close. And that's the only time we put timbers around the holes. We put 10 feet of cribbing, take the holes like a chimney, we'll fill this room up wall to wall, and our new floor will be right at that height. The rock for that comes from that hole back there.
okay.
So when they quit, did they just like walk out, or was it like a takedown
Basically,
operation?
No, it's like walk out, typically.
And then it sounds like what you're saying is that the technology, well, I don't know if it's there today, but like was basically you just kept looking for it. Like it was drill holes, find edges, but there was no. Is there technology today where they could have said, you know, used, I don't know, whatever they use to find where the deposits are?
It's going to be very much the same.
So there's nothing.
Yeah.
Still.
I'll quickly show you this. This is a tugger machine with 3 cables. There's a scraper blade, you see that? And the cables go up. And so we're going to be able to drag rock around this room with this thing. All right? So our pile of ore that was blasted, we can pull to the nearest hole and drop down. That rock coming in the room, we can drag it with those machines. But remember in the early days, they don't have that. So here we can kind of see the whole scope of the root's called a stope, the Cornish mining term. Here's the way to look at it. Everything in here, that space, was iron ore and was taken out. So this was contiguous, solid, specular hematite, that piece we held in the theater. And again, a cubic foot is 340 pounds. So it's nice. Once we're in it, we're in it. And when we hit the edge of it, it's the edge. So there's not a lot of separating that has to happen. You can tell by the weight of those pieces. You're certainly going to be able to tell, even in the low to no light conditions we had, what rock you're dealing with. And again, behind you, you see a lot more of the banded jasper, that striped rock there. Which again, is the toughest stuff of all to drill into that.
There's no like industrial use for jasper. There's nothing.
No, here's the thing. There was a use for tools. The ancient native peoples used it. But this is a kind of a neat thing. So this has been Minnesota's first iron ore mine, 1882. But we have evidence on this property of ancient native peoples mining that jasper. On the surface around here, there's a great, on Stunts Bay Road, which is on the other side of the park, going up the hill, on the other side of the mine. You crest the hill heading towards the lake, and off to the right there's an area of this banded jasper on the ground, banded iron formation. It's just beautiful. So, by building a hot fire on that rock, building it, heating it, throwing cold water, you can get it to pop and break, and that jasper is really great for tools because it's so strong. So we've been mining here, and these are peoples before the Cree and Lakota and the Anishinaabe folks. So again, we have a little bit of ore here, but generally speaking, we've hit the jasper. So what that means is blast off some ore and keep moving, keep trying. Once we get the drills, we're going to be able to go faster. We get underground. This is our light. And we talked about pay earlier. We're talking a little bit about that. So here's how we know how little they got paid. They had, of course, buy their own dynamite. In those early days with the hand tools, they're buying those. And they're buying their own candles. And they're going to get paid as a team. So team size varies, but your team contracts with the company so many car loads a month. That's how we measure the tonnage. We get paid so little that we're not going to use our candles unless we have to use them. So you think, well, I'll just put a lot of candles around, right? So these guys, remember now, we don't have machines to drag that blasted ore to the hole, to the raise. So we're doing that by hand. So those 200-300 pound chunks, we're going to be rolling them over and dropping them down. We do that for 12 hours. My first thought is, well, you put a bunch of candles along the edge of the hole, right? So you know where it is. Well, they can't afford that. Sometimes I like to say, if a miner from the 1800s was here when I'm talking to people with a candle burning and I'm not doing anything, that they'd knock me over. Because I'm wasting money. See, they need that for their family. That's how little they get paid. And granted, the candles too aren't going to be cheap because getting them in here is a difficult enough proposition. But that's how little they get paid. Once U.S. Steel gets a hold of the place in the early 1900s, they'll provide a hospital and a doctor. Well, they won't provide it. They'll make it available, and they'll charge you $1 on your paycheck. They might charge you for other things. They're gonna, if you're getting your supplies through the company, they're going to charge you for that, of course, too. Tower wasn't interested in the company store. He said, let businesses start up. He did. At the beginning, of course, send in men and supplies to build housing and stuff to set up the first miners, but he wasn't interested in making money off those daily things. In any case, if you're single, you're staying in a boarding house. If you have a family, you might be renting a company house. So the money you get is those expenses, buying some supplies. But after your 12 hours, 6 days a week, you're having gardens, pigs and chickens. This is what my grandpa did. He worked for the same company, Oliver Mining, in the early 1900s. In Eveleth, Fail location, Fail and Spruce mines. He worked underground in tough conditions. And again, when he came home, you got pigs and chickens, you got gardens to tend to. You cut wood all summer to heat all winter. He's growing hay. Cut that by hand. I have some of his tools. I have his side blades. I've got his carbide lamps for working in the mine. I've got the Truga my dad built in high school that they slaughtered the pigs with. They did that every year. And we've got the still that they made a little sleeve of its. after they made the wine, things like this. They took it easy occasionally. They had a party now and again, but it's all work. And I like to impress upon visitors the hard work that they did, and particularly that they didn't work any less hard in America than they would have had they stayed in Slovenia, where my grandparents came from. But I also like to tell kids, it's not this dour, woe is me hard work, it's what they knew. People in the 1800s, had just worked hard. You had to, right? There was no other way around it. And again, these miners probably did better than some of the loggers, but the company didn't give you much. So grandma's working hard at home, and my dad talks about it very nostalgically, this hard work. He enjoyed all that. He liked to work. Because of the hard work of these immigrants and putting education as a priority and having good schools and encouraging their kids to get an education, my dad, after graduating from Evelyn High School, went off to St. Cloud Teachers College and became a teacher and then a principal. And so he made a very good living, made possible by his dad and mom and their hard work. But he still liked to work. So his thing, when he would come home from school, from his principal job, we ate at 5:30 every day, around the dot. But he'd come home just after 5 and get out of his truck and straight for the garden. He'd head for that garden. And Mom would yell out the kitchen window, "Bill, not in your good shoes." And he'd kick off his school shoes right there in the grass and go in that garden in his stocking feet and start weeding. He wasn't even going to go in a house, So he loved that work. He spent his time in his retirement teaching students at Iron World, which was a Minnesota Discovery Center now, about life in the location, what it was like, and all the work and all the things they did, which he remembers that fondly. So, but they had to work hard just to stay alive, and the company didn't give them much assistance in that effort. Other questions, guys?
Nope.
You talked about the union coming in. When did the union come in then, and when did sort of conditions become better?
1943 in this mine, and it was the last of the mines on the range. So this mine, this ore, again, based on cost, we would have gone out of business sooner. 10 years in here, 1892. Okay, we're at our peak employment. About 2,000 guys, about 1,000 per shift. And again, more men because it's manual labor and because we're taking out ore as fast as we can from those pits and those early undergrounds. 92, how far down in the levels were they, do you think, James?
Oh, man.
6?
On this one, we're down to like level 10.
By 92?
Yeah.
1892, okay. So they've been underground for a while, but there's that many people working. It's good ore, right? Well, it's a significant moment in time. It happens to be our peak employment and peak production. And we did happen to take out half of the ore we did in the first 12 to 15 years. But 1892 is when they discovered ore on the Mesabi, south of here. First in Mountain Iron and Bowabic, then all across. Again, that ore is near the surface. It's much cheaper, and it's not as good, right? See, we've got iron and oxygen and no impurities to speak of. Their ore, 40s to 50%, not quite 60 range, has impurities with it, sulfur and phosphorus in particular. That messes up the steelmaking process considerably. And so the challenge of the steel mills, and the whole thing is a complicated thing. We have different inventions like the Bessemer converter furnace, and we have the blast furnaces that create the pig iron for the open hearth furnaces, okay? But one of the challenges in the 1800s is we want to get carbon out of that mixture at the end. We start with coke from coal, limestone, and iron ore. Those are the 3 ingredients. And of course, we need all that to get things heated and get chemical reactions to happen. We throw iron oxide, or iron ore, in, and you have to break the oxygen and iron bond. At the end, you're hoping for 97+% iron with a little carbon. That's steel versus, say, cast iron, which is a nice metal for cooking and lots of things, but it's not very good for making skyscrapers. That's got a lot of carbon still in it. So the one element that gets out the carbon and those impurities I mentioned is oxygen. So when the iron ore is in there and that oxygen is freed up, it'll form oxides with the sulfur, the phosphorus will float into the slag, or it'll connect with the carbon and come out as carbon dioxide. This is what we want. And if you throw more iron ore in, though, you're throwing in more impurities at the same time. So what they're really looking for at that time is something they can put in those furnaces that gives you higher amounts of oxygen without adding bad stuff, right? You need a pure iron oxide, a pure iron ore. That's what we have here. Here in large quantities, one mine in Michigan. So by 1901, U.S. Steel is formed as a corporation, and they take control of a lot of the mines, the railroads, and a lot of course, shipping and steelmaking. But since they have this ore now, and they have all that cheaper ore on the Mesabi that will work just fine for steelmaking if they can have this to add in to get better steel. Okay, so this becomes an absolutely necessary and special ore. And we talked about that price difference eventually, but as long as they needed it, this will feed U.S. Steel's furnace needs, and they can sell it on the open market for a very high price to the other steel makers. So that's what drives this place. The need for that extra oxygen without impurities. And that works well until technology changes again. The steelmaking process ultimately doesn't need this rock. With oxygen in tanks, any oxygen needs can be fed directly in. And there's other changes that, by 1962, they don't need this, and so they close down. So that's why it's abrupt, and there's ore left, and it'll always be here. Because they were only mining it because they needed it. But during the war, this place was absolutely needed to be functioning, right? You're only getting this stuff here, you're only getting the good steel for the war effort by putting this in. And so these guys are exempt from the draft. Yeah. And a lot of them weren't allowed to go because and we didn't bring in other workers. So women worked in a lot of the mines and the railroads, but not in here because this is a very specialized process. This place had to run. So if you look at the year 1943, we get a union. It's in the middle of the war. Part of it is, and that happened during World War I too. The labor movement, even though they didn't get the law till the 30s that recognized the right to collectively bargain, labor had a lot of power during World War I just the same, because the mines must operate, the factories must operate, the steel mills must operate, and they have leverage. Other mines were unionizing starting right in the 30s, right up through into the early 40s, but in 43 they have no choice. These guys had a lot of advantages here. You know, they got paid well. The contract system, I think, worked for them, partially because they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were in. Right? When you're in the hematite, you're in it. If you're working in the greenstone making the drifts, you're in that. You know how much you can get out in a day, right? Those other mines in the Mesabi, it varied so much. There was a lot of shenanigans, and they got rid of the contract system early on. So that unionization happened. Well, changes down there happened before they even had a union. Huge strikes, violent strikes. So we didn't have that here so much. Other questions?
How large was the town when there were 2,000 people working here? How large was it in the 60s, and how large right after it, like now? How
Good
big is it?
question. I'm going to use my phone because I have notes on this. Let's head this way.
Okay.
All right.